I'm Bruce Meyer, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Well, Bruce, welcome to the program. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you and to have you on Cars and Culture. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's my privilege to be here with you, Jason.
Thank you. Some have described you as the nicest man in the car enthusiast world. They say the smile that you have, Bruce, not affected, but painted from the heart, radiates, and your interest in other people, and especially the people who you're talking to, is 100% all in all the time, as genuine as can be. Now, if that's not a great way to open an interview, I'll just ask you the question. Do you agree with that?
Well, it definitely makes me feel good. I mean, because I spent a lot of time in the car world, and it's all about the people. And I just love people, and I always have. So I would agree with that. I'm a sensitive, loving person, and so that's lovely. I don't know quite how to respond to that, but it does make me.
Well, the other thing too, Bruce, everyone, or you're often referred to as everyone's car guy for a lack of pretension and really boundless enthusiasm for cars. And also because you're so well connected with every major player in the hobby. I think as you sit and look at not only your hobby, but the world that you've immersed yourself in, you have to agree that that boundless enthusiasm has been cultivated and is truly something that feeds on itself.
Well, again, thank you very much. I don't. Am I to respond to that?
Let's talk about the hobby.
I've just been so blessed by having so many dear friends, and I think I've been a good friend of theirs, and they've been great friends of mine, and I've just met so many people that I never thought I would ever meet. I grew up in a situation at home that had no time for cars. That we really didn't have the wherewithal to have anything worthy of that I would consider pride, and cars were just a way of getting around, and weren't much. And whenever I would even mention cars or look at a hot rod magazine, my parents just shuddered. I mean, what a waste of time this whole car thing is. So I didn't come from
money.
Oh my, and money. Oh yeah. I mean, get a job, do something, but just don't. I mean, don't wait. That's a dead end deal. So I've always said you're never too old to have a happy childhood. So I'm living the dream, and I've met so many wonderful people. Some well known, and others not known at all. But I've just been so lucky to surround myself with enthusiasts.
Your grandparents didn't even own a car. Is that right?
That's right. No, that was not part of it. No. My grandmother had an old car at the end, but my on my father's side, they never drove. Knew how to drive, didn't have the money for cars, and it was just not not part of their world.
And yet, your interest in it started very early. In fact, your interest in anything that moved started early. You bought your first vehicle was a motorcycle, right? The 1950s BSA Scrambler. $100, right? And you hid it in a friend's garage so your parents wouldn't find it.
Well, you've been doing your homework, Jason. So cars, anything motorized was just verboten, okay? And work was what it was all about. I've worked since I was old enough to remember anything. So I say that what really brought me into the car world was my job, which I mowed lawns, and I set bowling pins, and I did a lot of menial jobs. But I had what I say is the best paper corner in LA. It was right in on Highland Avenue, which led right into Hollywood. And I sold
Highland and Melrose, actually, right?
Highland and Melrose, right in front of Pizza Mozza, which is a famous pizzeria. And so I was making, for a 13-year-old, really big money. Every night, you could go home with a pocket full of change, And so, and my love of anything motorized, just I was saving my money for that. And so I bought a Doodle Bug, which was like a Briggs and Stratton, just like a little pocket kind of mode of transportation. I think it was developed during the 40s as a way of getting around, when there was no gas, or, I mean, it wasn't a sport bike at all, and it had no brakes. So I bought that, and that lasted a very short time because I didn't feel comfortable in that car. I just wouldn't stop on that motor scooter. I wouldn't stop. So then I put together kind of a bits of whizzer, buying parts. There was a local whizzer store, and I kind of did that. And then I bought a BSA, and it wasn't really a scrambler because it had what we call like ape hangers, big high
Oh,
bars.
sure. Yep.
I mean, it was just, it was laughable. But so then I had that, and of course all these things had to be hidden away, because my parents would just not approve of any of that. So that was kind of the start of my, my motorized career.
And you grew up near the old Arts Center, College of Design in LA. And when you were young, you would observe some of the GIs who were in hot rods. And that's where your love for the vehicle really came from. You liked Fords early, right?
Excellent, Jason. What a lead in. So I went to school at Third Street School, and that was literally next door to the Art Center School. And back, this was like in probably 1940, 46 or 47. The GIs were coming back, and the artistic ones were going to the Art Center School, and every GI, had a picture of his girlfriend in his car, or wish, his wannabe car. And so that was a really a big part of the late 40s for the car guys. And so many of them went to Art Center School, which specialized in automotive design. So it was literally, our play yard was literally adjacent to, the entrance to the Art Center. And while, a lot of my friends were playing dodgeball or kickball or tetherball or whatever we played back then, I was just like a fence crow. I literally hung on to that fence, just watching the cars pull in, and mostly hot rods or, modified cars. So that probably had a lot to do with my love of hot rodding. But really, a Hot Rod magazine was what it really, kind of got me into hot rods. And that, and a little bit of Popular Mechanics was, every now and then they'd have a little something on cars. But it was really Hot Rod magazine that seeded it for me.
Incredible. And we'll get into how Hot Rod magazine eventually got you to the Petersen Museum. But I want to go back to, you're 16 years old and your aunt gifts you a car, a 1950 Plymouth. So how did that go over in the family household?
Well, it went well in the family household. Didn't go very well with me, because my dad always said, "You save your money, and don't, and someday you'll have a car, and and you just save your money and don't spend it foolishly on anything." But so when I turned 16, $100 would buy you a 40 Ford, and not much more would buy you a 32 or a Dunn hot rod. So I mean, I had, I had the money to buy a very cool car, and because I had saved my money, and my parents just forbid it. One of my best friends bought a 40 Ford. He paid $100. It was a primered 40 Ford. I just, we used to cruise Hollywood in that thing, but my parents just would have nothing to do with it. And for the most part, I was a pretty obedient young man. It was always easier to, do what your parents told you and be honest with them. And that seemed to work out well. What I didn't tell them, about the scooters and motorcycles, I didn't offer that up, so to speak. So when I turned 16, my great aunt had a kind of a pea green 50 Plymouth. The good news was it was a fastback. So because they made a notchback, and they made station wagons and that type of thing. But she gave that, she gave it to my sister and I to share. My sister was 3.5 years older, so she was, almost 20. She had a day job. At that time, when I was 16, I was in school, and I really did, I walked or found a way to school, but I didn't really need it to go to school and back. So I got it kind of on the weekends, and my sister had it during the day, during the days to go to work. So, I went right about changing the color. There used to be a place called Earl Scheib, which would paint any car anytime for $29.95. And I painted it red, and my sister and my parents thought that would be okay. And it was a horrible paint job. I mean, it didn't last, but a few months, and it just started to peel off. It wasn't terrific. So then I repainted it, saved up and repainted it, and then I did the interior over. And on the gear shift, I grew up with Von Dutch and all those guys, and Norm Grabowski, and they always had cool gear shift knobs. So I literally got from the hardware store like a round ball, a cabinet knob, and painted it like an eyeball. It was not Von Dutch quality, but it did resemble an eyeball. And I put that on the gear shift. And my sister, God love her, was so clueless, and still, I mean, she didn't even know that stuff was on there, or did she care? She just drove the car to work and back. So that car kind of developed, and it turned, actually, I torched the front springs, brought it down in front, and I put 57 Plymouth hubcaps. They weren't really 57 Plymouth hubcaps. They were the Pep Boy variety, for much less money. So it was a Pep Boy special, and J.C. Whitney was a big, automotive parts place back in Chicago. So I bought little bits and pieces, and I actually you could buy pinstriping decals, water transfer decals. And I tried that. That didn't work too well. But finally, I got the thing pinstriped and done, and it was a pretty cool car. And then as soon as, yeah, go ahead.
You were full tilt Americana at that point. And
oh, yeah.
Your dream car was all about that. And then all of a sudden you realize that you could buy a Porsche for the same price as a Chevrolet. And anybody who knows what's in the Petersen Museum that you own that's connected to Porsche, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you go, wow, that's where it all began.
Yeah. So you have to understand, my parents were all about practicality, and so they told me that if I saved my money, that they would help me buy my first car. They would go 50-50. And I actually had cars before that, because when I went to college, I found when you went through the orientation line, you could actually get a student loan at the beginning of the year, as long as you paid it back at the end of the year. My dad had given me tuition, and it was up to me to kind of earn my, board and keep. And so I worked my way through school in that regard. But I used the tuition money that he gave me, and then I took a loan for it. And so I bought a motorcycle and a 50 Merc before I got into the, my real car. And they were not insured. I just paid cash, and I didn't know anything about insurance. But so anyways, my dad said that if you save your money, he would help me buy my first car. And so that was in like 1960 when this whole process was happening. And I knew he would relate to the Chevy Biscayne, because that was the cheapo post model, So I had spec'd out a 60 Chevy Biscayne with the big engine and, stick, and it was a pretty cool thing. And just as I was ready to pull the trigger on it, was $2,400. I took note of these Porsche, these foreign cars, and right up the street from me was John von Neumann, who had Competition Motors. And I went up there and I noodled around, and I found I could buy a Porsche brand new, delivered in Europe, for $2,700. It was just a few $100s more than the Chevy. So I convinced my father that was a way more practical approach, just a few dollars more, and had, instead of 200 and some horsepower, it had 60 horsepower. So I got a no option Porsche.
No radio.
No radio. It was pretty. I actually the two options I had, because I was very much into chrome wheels and red paint. So it was signal red, which was a small upcharge, and it had chrome wheels, and those were the only options. And so that was my car, and I actually picked it up in Europe, because I took a semester out and kind of traveled around the world. And so I picked up the car in Germany and shipped it back, and that was really my college car, and I loved it. That car I took great care of.
So I want to get to your car collection and how you started to build it, but I want to go to an LA Times article that described you at that time. You were a long-haired hippie from UC Berkeley, and you suggested that your family expand their shop that they had, Gary's Gifts, to include candles and mail order. And this then starts the trend of you getting into an entrepreneurial lifestyle and allowing you to really expand your car collection. So you're selling candles in Beverly Hills to guys like
Yeah,
Elton John or Ozzy Osbourne eventually, right?
exactly.
And
Jason, where are you finding this stuff? You're on target. Good God.
the research
So
department.
yeah, Lee, you have a great research department. When I got out of college, I did have like pretty long hair. I mean, Frank Zappa and I were twins, okay? And when I got out of college, I went and I bartended for a year up at Lake Tahoe, and then I went and took a job in Michigan, and then I came back out to California, and my parents, they had a store that was, kind of, it started out as art supplies and some random gifts. It's a long story how they ended up with that, but they were running that, and my dad just couldn't wait. If anybody asked me what I was going to do for a living, my dad would say, "Oh, Bruce is coming to work for me. We're going to work together." And I love my dad. I mean, we were super close, and different as night and day, but I owe everything to good parenting. I mean, honestly, if I didn't have the parents I had, I mean, it's just frightening to think of what direction I might have gone. But at any rate, so they were very anxious for me to come and join the family gift shop, and I just couldn't relate to anything they had down there. And so there was a little store that came for rent up the street, and it was a necktie shop. And this gal, Lenore, used to make neckties for Clark Gable and Gary Cooper and all the movie stars. It was a very famous Lenore's neckties. Anyway, she passed away. And I saw a for rent sign. So I went to the landlord and I said, I want to open a candle shop. And, he was all, he said, fine, do it. Pay the rent. You can do whatever you want. So my dad thought that was the craziest idea. But being the kind of guy that he was, he said, Bruce, you just go and you'll make your own mistakes and you'll learn and you'll come back. So anyway, so I opened a candle shop, and we actually, had that there for, almost, I guess, 30 years, maybe a little longer. And it evolved. It started out as candles, and you could smell all the incense and candles as you walked up the street, because back then you'd leave the front door open. So every now and then I catch a little whiff of that familiar smell of my candle shop. But anyways, it evolved into arts, and then we got into art posters, and it became a little gallery. And the shop itself was the driveway to a building. That's what it was converted from, a driveway to a shop. It was about 1,500 square feet. And up the back was this ramp, which was always a curiosity, like, so this is a driveway to somewhere. And then shortly, maybe a year or two after I'd opened the shop, the landlord said that the upstairs was available. And so I went up and I looked at it, and here is an old converted garage that was converted to a shoe warehouse. And I thought this would be great. And back at that time in the 70s, there was a fellow named Roger Horchow. And Roger Horchow was like the dean of mail order. He was head of mail order for Neiman Marcus. And Neiman Marcus had a famous catalog. And so I thought, well, this would be the natural thing. We just go right into mail order, And by the way, I think I was, 28 years old, and probably the smartest I've ever been in my life. I mean, I laugh about it. My roommate, we thought we knew everything about business and investing and women and everything, relationships. We were on top of our game. So I always kid. I said right behind the garage, it was Ralph Lauren had a store. It'd be like coming home one day and thinking, I'm going to do that Ralph Lauren thing. Like it looks so easy. So, anyways, we got it. So that segued into the mail order business, off we went, but and then later I got more involved in the family business, and that's been a fun story too. My nephew runs that now.
And you get hooked up with Robert E. Petersen, the publisher of Hot Rod magazine. You actually live near you live near each other and belong to some of the same professional groups. And you said not long ago you became good friends, and the thought of a car museum in Los Angeles, I don't know why this wasn't thought of back in the 20s or 30s, but you start on this path to create this experience, a cultural icon.
Yeah.
Tell me the story of
okay. I really became close with Bob like in the late 70s. I had joined the family business, and I joined a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. We started to build it. I've always kind of liked tangibles and I guess been entrepreneurial. When I was in college, I sold college stationery and I bought and sold motorcycles, and I've always liked tangibles. I've never been a stock market guy. So the family business did appeal to me because I liked buying and selling. And my dad was of the Depression generation. So his focus was like, he would buy closeouts. He would find out where he could buy something on the cheap. And I would look for like quality, image making stuff, the best brands, the best quality. And it was high priced, but that's what we did. So we got along great. And so the Gearys started to develop a real reputation for high end. And we did well, and we merged the mail order into that, and we really grew a nice business. And so I joined YPO, and in YPO is Robert E. Petersen. And he was also he was a neighbor of mine, but in a much classier house. Okay. There's north of Sunset, he lived large. And and Robert E. Petersen, even though he started Hot Rod and Motor Trend and so forth, he wasn't a complete car guy. He was more into hunting and fishing and airplanes and sporting life, and Hot Rod. Even though his father had a gas station up by Barstow, and he lived and knew a lot of the early hot rodders, I can't say that was his main focus. And about I want to say it was probably in the 70s, he had an idea for a car museum. And by the way, there was a car museum sort of, and the Natural History Museum of LA being the only kind of, other than an art museum and a great museum, Natural History Museum of LA took car donations, and they had cars in their basement, okay, or their storage facility that never saw the light of day. So there was a kind of a car, repository for old cars. But so Petersen opened this museum in Hollywood, and his favorite, like, if you had to pick, like, Pete, who's your favorite car designer? He would say George Barris. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Robert E. Petersen liked the extreme Barris, custom weird stuff, not necessarily my taste. And he opened a museum. He had Tony and Nancy with his dragster there, and they did a burnout on Hollywood Boulevard. And that museum was a complete failure. It was not a success, and it closed shortly thereafter. So Petersen, a brilliant entrepreneur, he kind of was an opportunistic buyer, so to speak. He had everything from guns to gold nuggets to real estate, art. He liked to buy stuff. And so the building that Petersen's in today was built by Cebu, which was a Japanese department store that wanted to expand into Los Angeles, and our Connor Pavilion on top was a tea room, actually. So then Cebu didn't work out so well, and then another group called Orbox came in, and they were kind of a price department store, ready to wear, so forth, and then they failed. So the Petersen Museum building just kind of languished, and somebody, being the real estate guy he is, somebody offered it Robert E. Peterson. That would be a great car museum. So that's kind of how it all started. And then the natural history, Robert E. Peterson and I were on the board of the Natural History Museum together. So we'd go to the meetings. We thought, well, this would be a natural, because the Natural History Museum could have a place to display their cars, and we would build a museum. There was a company called Gray Line Tours, which was like the Greyhound. I mean, they did tour buses. They were the tourist company. We talked to them about headquartering at what is now the Petersen Museum, and we'd have this great museum, and we get 1 million people a year through there at $10 a head, and the Natural History Museum just saw that as like a cash cow. You know, they could give a hoot about hot rods and cars. They just wanted the money. So by partnering with them, we had street cred as a museum. We had their cars. We had the Gray Line Tours as kind of the basis, and would be the tour headquarters. And we were, you know, to start this museum. Of course, it all didn't work. Nothing worked. First of all, the Natural History Museum and the Petersen Museum were just like yin and yang. I mean, the director of the Natural History Museum, I think in the maybe 5 years, I don't know however long we were together, 5 or 6, 7 years, I don't think he was there twice. It was of no interest to him what was going on. Our director had no time for the Natural History Museum, which didn't help relationships. The Gray Line went bankrupt. I think the most we ever had through there were 100,000 people, not 1 million. It was just nothing worked. And like Natural History Museums kind of worldwide, you know, they have these dinosaur exhibits and, you know, wild animal exhibits that are dioramas, you know, that don't change. You know, they'd have a leopard in a tree with some kind of kill that hanging over a branch, and it's cool, you know. And you went through there, you know, but nothing ever changed. I mean,
but not like a car museum.
Not like a breathing, living, dynamic car museum. So when the Petersen was built, we were full of dioramas, which were cool when we opened. People flooded in to see these cool old street scenes and that kind of stuff with an old car in front of it. But, you know, after 10 years, you know, how many times can you see the diorama of a dealership or a doggy drive-in or a gas station, you know? And it was just boring. And I chaired it for the first 10 years. And then one of our directors, David Sidoric, and I got together, and David kind of led the charge. We got to either redo this place or get out. We just kind of, you know, it was just like the same old. And that's when we, you know, reinvented and did up the Petersen Museum that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Jason, you know how it is unbelievably fabulous. So yes. we did an architectural kind of competition, so to speak. We had Frank Gehry and Chris Bangle and all, you know, any car designer, architect. We just wanted to see what their vision of the Petersen was, and we were lucky enough. David met this fellow, Gene Cohn, who had a big architectural company, Cohn, Petersen, and Fox, international. They had buildings everywhere throughout the world, but not in LA. So we thought, well, this would be cool. And would you like to design the building? And by the way, Frank Gehry, we knew we had to come up. The Petersen building was the most nondescript, nothing building. It was a complete nothing burger. You drive by it and you wouldn't even know what was inside. You know, they put these fins on it, but anyway, so we knew we had to come up with something extraordinary, something memorable. So you know, Frank Gehry said, I'd love to design that. And nothing against Frank Gehry, he would have done a great design. He's done so many amazing architectural places, but it's all about Frank Gehry and his vision. And he said, you know, we'll take $1 million and we'll design you a building. Well, Dave and I looked at each other and we thought, we don't have $1 million just to see what he's going to come up with. But all along, this Gene Cohen came up and did the design of what we have now,
which
and
is
he never
striking and phenomenal.
It is phenomenal.
Iconic. Truly, Bruce.
Truly. Thank you very much, Jason. And so we knew that something like that would be special. And again, Gene never charged us a penny. He said, only if you like it and we do it, then you can pay me. So he did models, he did renderings, he did mock-ups. And so David and I decided let's go with that. And so I'd been the chair for 10 years. I said, David, it's your turn. David said, I'm not going to be chair. So we thought, well, who's going to be chair? So Peter Mullen, who who at one time co-chaired the museum with me, and it kind of had enough, and he didn't last long as co-chair. We decided Peter's the guy. He's a big industry guy and a smart guy, an entrepreneur, and he can negotiate. So David and I went to Peter Mullen and we said, Peter, we've got this thing all queued up. We're going to make this museum the best museum in the world. And David and I must have been a hell of a salesman, because Peter said, okay, I'll chair it. And hence fast forward what we have now. I think I've probably skipped a whole bunch of steps in the middle. But
let me talk about what's in there, because for those who don't know, it is full of iconic vehicles, not the least of which many vehicles that come from your own collection, which we'll talk about. But you want to talk about a walk through history, and especially the Hollywood history too, where the NASCAR Herbie used in Herbie Fully Loaded, or the Honda S2000 from Too Fast, Too Furious, Lightning McQueen from Pixar and Cars 2, Steve McQueen's 1956 Jaguar XK-SS, the Batmobile from Batman Returns, of course, the DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future. And I think I've covered 5% of what's in the museum, or 2%.
Well, Jason, the nice thing about the museum, and when we redesigned it, and believe me, we literally took out every screw, nut, bolt, piece of paper, everything, and we started from the ground up. We had this fellow, who's a brilliant designer, and we all sat down and we designed a museum that could be changed. That Hollywood gallery could become like the scene to Back to the Future. It could be the Porsche factory. It could be, in other words, we have so many video capabilities and so much flexibility in the museum that we can change that, the displays like instantly. And we have a wonderful Brian Stevens, who's head of displays. He's just a genius. And so we can change up that place. And that's what made it so special, is that we haven't gotten stale. We've celebrated the anniversary of Bugatti, the history of Bugatti, the 70th anniversary of Porsche. Now we've got a display that just went in called Bond in Motion, and we have
all the Bond cars.
It is unbelievable, and little videos by each one. I mean, it is so exciting. It's just so exciting. We have James Hedfield, who was so generously gave us his entire collection. So we've got great motorcycles. We've got Juan Gonzalez, who owns Mission
Formula One
Foods.
cars.
Unbelievable. I mean, I just met Juan up at Carmel, and he said, I've got a collection of Formula One cars. Well, I thought that's cool, so I didn't know how cool that was until Juan gave us his collection. And to see those cars just up close and personal, most people only see Formula One in a video game or on TV. I mean, to see them there, it's just coolness.
And let me tell you, this transition that the auto industry is going in right now, from internal combustion to some percentage of electric now, the Petersen Museum has a walkthrough time of showing the fact that electric cars have been here for 100 years. They weren't very popular, but all the way from the very first electric vehicle to, of course, the Teslas and everything in between. And for just even a student of the industry, it's an education. It truly is, and really, really well developed.
Well, thank you. And the electric cars were, turn of the century, because
Right.
They were for women, really, because I mean, for a man, you had to learn how to be a mechanic and start it and have strength and all that. And a woman just gets into her Baker electric or whatever electric and just, turns it on and goes. So, electrics aren't new, and they are, they've made a massive progress, and we have that there. So you're right. We have a mission to, enlighten and talk about the history. And I think we're doing a really good job at that.
Bruce, you have been collecting for a long time. You have a world-renowned collection, but you don't think of yourself as a collector.
No, I just don't. When somebody says collector, I thought, boy, who are they talking about? So I'm 80. I've been doing it a long time. I bought a Gullwing back I bought the Porsche in 61. I bought a Gullwing in 65, 64 actually. And so I've just bought my cars one at a time over the last, 60 years, so to speak. And I haven't sold very many cars because I'm very picky on what I like or what I can drive or what I can race or what I can, ride at. But motorcycles obviously played a really important part in my youth. And I raced motorcycles for a lot of years, unbeknownst to my parents. They had no idea. But that's what I did. And so I think of myself as an enthusiast, and what I have now are just cars that I've enthusiastically acquired over 60 years. Never thinking of myself as like a perfect collection. I mean, although it's quite hot rod centric or Porsche centric, that isn't by design. That's just happened, and it's what it is.
You were close friends with Carroll Shelby, of course, the legendary Carroll Shelby, and you have one of the first production Cobras ever made, the CSX 2001, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know that you've also focused on Le Mans vehicles. Le Mans for you is the World Series, the Super Bowl, and everything else wrapped into one. And so, what won there, you wanted a part of, and just some amazing vehicles that make up your collection that the Petersen is happy to showcase. That must be a complete thrill for you to have those vehicles on display.
Well, I think when you have a significant vehicle or a historic vehicle, that there's really an obligation to share it. And I've really tried to do that with every one of, my cars and whatever I have. I just think sharing is the fun part, because it's really, again, comes back to the people enjoying it. I say, if you're the last man on earth and you have a Ferrari GTO, what fun is it if you can't drive it with your friends or show it, or, share it, so sharing is always, and that's why the museum kind of fits my MO. I love people. I love sharing. I like seeing people get enthused, and the museum has been a great vehicle for me to express that. And I have.
It must have been hard over the course of the last couple of years, let's say 18 months, due to COVID, in two ways. Access for people to get to the museum, and I know it's now open, but or reopened, but also the concours events, the places where everyone would gather, the Pebble Beaches, that were sort of put off in 2020 and now reimagined in 2021. How has COVID changed not only the museum, but also the collector world?
Well, and it killed it in 20, but it is just burgeoning now. I mean, you just say cars and coffee, and they're in line waiting to go to it. And the Petersen is doing extremely well. I mean, we were like 60% up, after we cranked it up again. So, I mean, people were so hungry to get back in the groove. So, through like really brilliant management with Terry Cargus and Michael Bodell and Lincoln Ramirez, we have the dream team of museum management. And so during COVID, we went to videos of collections, and those guys developed a whole, online presence for us that that we were actually able to monetize in some ways, but we came through COVID. I mean, we're in the black. You know, we've covered all of our expenses. We've had some amazing, benefactors that have donated, and sponsored within our museum. And, we've just been really lucky to have generous people. We have a group called the Checkered Flag 200, which I think is the greatest car club in the world. I started it when the museum was under construction back in like 1990. And, we had Shelby and Gurney and Phil Hill and Parnelli, and sadly we've lost so many of those, but we have almost 700 members that pay now $2,000 a year to be a member. And we have a great magazine. We do trips. We do an event every month. And we have, I just signed up some fellows from Florida because we do an away trip every year, which is a big deal. So, through the generosity of a lot of people and the brilliance of our management, we have sailed through the COVID, and now we're open and making up for lost time. And I think a lot of the car show, Pebble Beach this year was fabulous. I mean, Amelia Island was, I think, Bill's best ever, so I think, the love of cars has not waned at all. And we're taking full advantage of that.
You're a rally guy more than a Concours guy, aren't you? You do a rally every day if you could.
Just point me. I love the drive. I drive every car. I mean, obviously I have an old dragster and some of the cars we just can't take out. But this year I just did a whole bunch of rallies. We did a Porsche rally up to Bend, Oregon. Ross Myers, who has a fabulous museum, he'd be a great interview for you, has a museum called Three Dog Garage in Philadelphia. He did a hot rod tour in Montana. I just came back 2 days ago from a GT350 tour. So, I love the drive, but again, I love the drive because of the people and the fun cars. So it all comes back around to the people. I'm just so fortunate to know these people that enthusiasts that love the drive as well. So I do love the rallies, and I also did the California Mille, and Colorado Grand is a great rally, and every chance I get, I drive.
Well, and you drive fast, because you once said that the most memorable drive you've ever had was the time you joined the 200-mile-per-hour club. And what exactly does it take to get into the 200-mile-per-hour club? And what does membership entail?
Yeah, well, that's really great. And that was thanks to a friend of mine, Jack Rogers, who gave me my first ride at Bonneville. So growing up as a hot rodder, I mean, it's either top fuel drag racing or land speed racing. And the genesis of hot rod competition were the dry lakes, Muroc and the different dry lakes is where you'd go out and see how fast you could go. But that was an ordeal getting there. So Wally Park said, let's just do a quarter-mile thing. We can do that everywhere in every city. So that kind of developed that. But for me, Bonneville has always intrigued me. I'd never been there until, I went there like in the 90s. And it's a place on earth that every enthusiast should experience. And Speed Week is a great time to do that. So in Bonneville, they don't care if you're Parnelli Jones or Jackie Stewart. You've got to qualify, and you got to start in 125 and then 150 and then 107, and you have to get licensed. So thanks to my friend Jack Rogers, I drove his car and got licensed. But then, Bonneville has all kinds. I mean, you've got George Poteet, who does, real land speed racing at the upper edges, and Charlie Nurburg. But there are roadsters, and there are old Bonneville cars just seem to get recycled. So, it's like the rodeo. You can see the guys in the, the 50 Ford or whatever, they're neat and they're cool what they've done. But the roadster drivers, the guys in the open cars, to me, those are the bull riders. Those are the guys with the wind in your face, just going as fast as you can. So So it's always been a dream of mine to go over 200 in a roadster, and I was able to accomplish that. And by the way, when you join the 200 mile an hour club, it was so funny because Bill Warner, who's a very dear friend who has Amelia Island, said, I'm going out to Bonneville this year, and I want to join that 200 mile an hour club. We've got a roadster that'll do it. Well, sadly the car broke down, but I said, Bill, it's just not going 200. You have to break an existing land speed record over 200. So, it's just not a matter of going 200. And you've had 50 years of Bonneville where guys in Camaros and Mustangs and Roadsters and, Streamliners and modifieds, they've been, competing with one another every year over and over and over again. So it's just not like, well, I'll just say that old Roadster record, I'll go over that. You just don't do that. It's really hard to join the 200 mile an hour club. And somebody said there are fewer people in the 200 club than climbed Everest. And I think it's just that hard because Bill Warner, sadly, he got out there and I think he won 100 and then the engine broke. But it's very hard to join that club. And I think that could be my proudest moment. I'm super brave. I wear my 200 mile an hour. You get a red hat. Oh. And so it's funny because I wore my red hat somewhere and it looks just like a Trump hat.
I was thinking that. Make America fast again.
Yeah, that's right. So it was funny because I remember walking out, the house, and Raylene said, "What's that hat? You got on?" She thought it was a "Make America Great Again" hat. I said, "What?" I turned around and looked at her and it says 200 mile an hour on the front. So that was funny. So, but it's fun. I mean, that's been an experience that I'll never forget.
Let's go back to the museum.
Sure.
How important is it? This show is called Cars and Culture. How important is it to have culture on display there? And how important is car culture to you?
Well, very important. And there's different genres. I mean, we've had the lowriders. We're thinking about doing chopper motorcycles. I mean, there are different cultures. There are, land speed cultures, motorcycle cultures, outlaw cultures,
hot rod cultures.
Those awful hot rod guys. They find their way in. They find their way into everything.
You found hot rods into the Petersen, yeah.
Oh God, no, that's been because hot rods to me are the genesis of everything that I love and everything that so many of us love. And for so long, they were just considered outlaw. You might as well have been a Hell's Angel to be a hot rodder, So it's been a mission of mine, I guess, for the last, 25, since 1980, I got back into hot rods. So it's 40 years. I just wanted people to know how important hot rodding and the innovation and everything that comes out of hot rodding has been to everything you love in the car today, and the culture and the custom and so forth. So it's and getting him into Pebble Beach was probably the defining moment. That Pebble Beach was kind of the echelon of greatness in the world of collector cars, and
they might look down their noses at hot rods.
Yeah, they were. It was the elite place to go to enjoy the elite group of fabulous cars, Packards and Duesenbergs and the like, and Mercedes and so forth. So early on, I made a big pest of myself, at the people from Pebble Beach. You got to have hot rods, and at the time, Lauren Tryon and Jules Human were in charge. And Jules looked at me and said, "Over my dead body, there'll never be hot rods at Pebble Beach." Well, I wasn't about to, give up so easy. So for 10 years, I sent them every credible quote, picture, of all their favorites in hot rods. And so finally, Lauren Tryon, who was, God bless him, was just a cool guy, faxed me and said, "Bruce, okay, are you ready? One time, okay, just like, I know they just wanted to get rid of me. We're going to have hot rods at Pebble Beach." And I said, "Great." So Ken Gross, who is a dear friend of mine and a hot rodder, helped, in curating the first hot rod class. But it was a real battle getting him. And then once hot rods were in there, then friends of mine were taking note, like, "That's cool. I'd like to have one of those." And I was just with Roger Morrison, who's Mr. Rolls Royce and elite. He's got a hot rod, and Bill Warner bought a 32 Ford, and all of a sudden, all my friends, Chip Connor And Rob Walton, you know, who has like one of everything cool, he bought a hot rod last year. So it's
You're converting them one at a time.
I am converting them one at a time. And I just a quick story, because for 30 years I had lunch with a fellow named JB Nethercutt, Phil Hill, Tom Powles, and Tony Heinsberger and Dick Nolan. We would have lunch every single Friday. And I didn't have much to add to that, because these were old timers talking about the great collectors. And so Phil Hill talked about hot rods, and my ears perked up. He said, Bruce, in Santa Monica, like I knew that in every, whether it was Whittier or Montebello or, you know, Pittsburgh, you know, every community had a hot rod club, a roadster club. Okay. And Phil was telling me about the hot rod club in Santa Monica that his family refused to have him associate with. And he said, Bruce, it was called the Low Flyers. And I go, I'd never heard of it. So I said, really? He said, Bruce, do you have any idea who was in the Low Flyers? I said, I have no idea. Well, Stu Hilborn Injection, Phil Remington, the secret weapon of Shelby and Gurney, what maybe the greatest Carmine, Travers and Coons, Traco, who built all of Penske's motors, Jack Engel. Anyways, it was a brain trust of innovation and engineering and genius. And that's what hot rod clubs were. They were full of these, you know, energetic, brilliant minds that wanted to express themselves either in speed or style or whatever. So that's why I just love hot rodding, and I'm a huge fan of the Low Flyers, even though they're long gone, you know. But anyways, good fun.
A couple more questions about your collection. You've got the Le Mans winning Porsche 935, a Ferrari 250 GT SWB. You've got the aforementioned Cobra. What are you most fond of in your collection, if you were to narrow it down to a couple? I know that's hard. I know that's hard.
Jason,
what would you?
You know, give me the softballs. You know, don't give me these, you know, fast curveballs. So okay. So I think if I was down to one car,
if you were down to one,
it would be the Cobra. Because it's the very first one. It's seriously the first one. It was the first Cobra ever to race. It raced in Europe. It's unmolested. It's original body. I love that car. And you get in it, and it's one of those cars that when you start it, you know the fun begins. You know, and it's got great sounds, and you think you're just going warp speed, and you just get blown off by a Tesla. You know. So it gives you all the sensations of speed. So that would probably be the car that I would hold on to. But Le Mans is everything to most manufacturers. And just yesterday I did a video with people from General Motors in my garage on the new Z06 Corvette. And basically they're calling that a race car for the street. And and it all relates back to Le Mans. I have the C6R that won Le Mans in 2009. I just think Le Mans is everything. So we have 5 winners and 7 cars that race there. It's just a real appeal to me, and it probably started with when I turned 60, I bought a short wheelbase Berlinetta, because that was always a dream car for me. And the one that I bought, I stepped up. I bought the Le Mans winner. It finished first in the GT class and 3rd overall. So that got me really cranked up on Le Mans, and it's kind of gone from there. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it does. What would you like to have in the collection that you don't have?
If it came down to one car, you know, like you could magically say one car would be a Scarab. The Lancer Aventador Scarab, that car to me checks every box. It's as good looking as any, you know, sports car ever was. It's an American car, and I'm a patriot. You know, I love American stuff. You know, and it won, and it beat the Europeans. So, and you know, the good news is I can lust for that all I want. It ain't never going to happen, because you got John Mozart has one, Miles Collier has one, and Rob Walton have one. And none of these guys, I don't think, are going to be strapped for cash anytime soon or decide there. And by the way, if it came for sale, I couldn't afford it anyway. So So, over time, I've tried to buy cars that, resonated in history. We have Don Prudhomme's Dragster, maybe the winningest car in all of motorsports ever in the history of
Yeah,
motorsports. It
I've
raced.
seen it there at the museum.
It's fabulous, bright yellow. We have the World Championship go-kart, Jimmy Amani, who's now 96 years old. We have his. It won the World Championship. And we've got a Miller-powered hydroplane, So I just love the story. I love the cars and boats and bikes that, walk the walk. And I just, I don't even have to drive some of those. I just look at them and they just excite, So I've tried to buy cars that resonated with me.
Excellent. Everyone's car guy. I want to thank you so much, Bruce Meyer. You lived up to the opening, which is you are the nicest man in the car enthusiast world. And I appreciate you being on Cars and Culture.
Well, it's a privilege to be here with you, Jason. And I'm not sure what take home value there was, but I hope your listeners enjoyed it. And it's been a pleasure for me and a joy for me to be with you, Jason.
Thank you. The Petersen Museum now showing the Bond cars from the James Bond movies. You can check it out at the museum's website. But first and foremost, Bruce Meyer, thank you.
God bless and thank you.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.